Good evening, and first and foremost, thank you very much again, Don. This is our second time hosting, which we feel is an informal, informative meeting that we have the opportunity to present what we see and feel is a breath of fresh air for the downtown area, the rebirth of the downtown. If we look at it for the last maybe 100 years, downtown was a bustling retail traffic. And we all know what has transpired over the last several decades that has migrated to the malls, strip malls, and so forth. The downtown is at this point, we have municipal, we have the arts, we have a sprinkling of some retail, but what we're looking for at this point, over and above the main thrust of this, which is what the grant is really applicable for, it's the separation of the storm sewer and the sanitary, which we've heard so much about that. Oneida County is under a consent order, and this is going to move and help with that consent order for economic development, not only in the city of Utica, but for Oneida County. When we looked at this, from the beginning, we were looking for a lot of input from residents, business owners. We sat with the DOT, we sat with the transit, we sat with the county executive, we sat with the fire chief, the police chief, we sat with DPW. We've reached out to business leaders throughout, and there is, quite frankly, there's mixed on this, and that's why we're here. We're here to tell you that the concept, what the master plan has embraced, the footprint. This is why we have something along this magnitude. If we go back multiple years, and before my time, the center of Genesee Street had trolley cars. I don't know if anybody here would remember that. I don't want to see your hand, but there were trolley cars down the center in here. And I think one of the things before we get into the presentation, and with Brian and Gorn, is the fact that the medium is not going to be the entire length of Genesee Street from the roundabout all the way through. And as we go through the presentation, we'll see that. There's a lot of misnomers out there. There's a lot of fears out there. I think when you have the opportunity to see it, feel it, touch it, get some type of visuals, you'll have a different understanding of it. This also brings into our downtown parking that we've talked about for years and years and years. And as we go through the presentation, you'll have examples of A, B, and C, which does address the whole concept of downtown. Everyone always says we need to move forward, we need change, we're stagnant and so forth. We traveled throughout. We went to Schenectady, we went to Syracuse and so forth. And everyone says, you know, how about, why don't you be more like Schenectady? Well, we're putting this like Schenectady. That's what they're at. They have at this point. We looked at the Armory, and people are saying, let's look at the Armory and encapsulate that. We're taking pieces of that also. So we're taking what the majority of the people have said. The key here is to make the people that are not quite secure with this, to get your input on this, and to see where it's flexible, where it could be adjusted, if it could be adjusted, and so forth. This also hinges on us getting a grant. At this point, we have been very fortunate with the CFA, and now with the federal government, we won't know for, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks, whatever it may be. But in order to get to the steps that we did, we obviously have put something well together that they feel and embrace it. And just to retract, the base of this grant that we are applying for is really about the infrastructure underneath the separation of the storm sewer and sanitaries. The rest of it is changing the complexion of downtown. And my analogy is, most of us have lived in our homes for a long period of time, and at some point you want to change it, remodel it, because either for energy, accountability, making it easier for you, it would be kind of, I think, to put this all together and put the money into it would be, and not changing anything, we would not be doing the best interest to the future of our city, and also neglecting what all these residents have put together in the master plan. So in saying that, we'll start with the presentation. At any point after the presentation, we'll take any questions that you may have or input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. My name is Brian Thomas, Commissioner of Urban and Economic Development for the City of Utica. Just to take a step back and explain the basis for the plan and how this plan unfolded. When the mayor came into office and asked us to put together a plan for downtown, the first thing we did was look at the master plan that the council had just adopted several months prior. Obviously, we wanted to make sure that any new plan coming out of our office was in keeping and consistent with the city's master plan, given that it had been just adopted. Thank you. And in going through that master plan, there is a specific section devoted just to downtown. And in looking at that section, there are a number of goals and objectives that were included in the master plan that have been incorporated into this plan, including the 5 bulleted goals and objectives on the screen now. First, mentioned in the master plan was to develop a self-sufficient, meaning a plan that pays for itself, program for public parking that accommodated future public and private development throughout the downtown. Second was to incorporate environmentally conscious infrastructure in any infrastructure project throughout the downtown. Third was to utilize safescape principles, meaning that any streetscape that's designed is done in a way that keeps in mind the safety and perception of security that people have when they visit the downtown. The fourth goal and objective in the master plan that we incorporated into this plan was to incorporate a public parking signage program. I think when a lot of us go to other downtowns, you often see the blue letter P sign, which indicates public parking in a lot of different municipalities. The city of Utica doesn't have that, and for a lot of visitors, it's difficult to know when they enter the downtown where the public parking opportunities are. And we're seeking to address that through this plan. And then finally, the master plan called for rejuvenating Genesee Street corridor as a boulevard. With that, the first project goal was to enhance economic development opportunities in the downtown, as well as citywide and regionally, through a complete reconstruction of the sewer infrastructure below the street. And with that, Goran Smiljic from the engineering department will explain what's currently below the street and what we are aiming to do with the proposed project.
Good evening. My name is Goran Smiljic. I'm Deputy City Engineer for the City of Utica. On what we are trying to do here with this grant to address one of the biggest issues and biggest problems in the City of Utica, which is downtown. All these years we spent probably over $80 million fixing the sewer in certain spots. Right now we are doing such a huge investment in West Utica, separating. We have a plan to go in East Utica, but we never actually tried to address the downtown. Downtown, considering the reason for it, because the cost is so much. And right now, when this grant came forward, we tried to say, okay, what's our biggest problem, what's our biggest fear? And we said downtown and how to address these issues. What we have right now in downtown, it's a combined sanitary and storm sewer, which means every time when it rains, combined sewage, together with storm water go under one pipe under Genesee Street and go directly to the plant. During the heavy storms, usually during not such heavy storms, the plant itself can handle the volume of sewage coming to the plant. During the heavy rains, what happens, the gate at the plant receives its maximum, shuts the gate off, and overflow, they open and they go directly, sewage go directly to the Mohawk River. Right now, we took this plan into consideration, saying, okay, how we can address these issues, what's the problem, and knowing that some of the infrastructure is in Genesee Street, especially downtown, is built in the 1800s. We don't actually know what we have down there. It's so old and it's so complex that once when you open the street and see what's going on down there, we're trying to address all these issues and these problems. As of what we would try to do, there's a couple of different options that we are working on this. Actually, there's a rooftops. There's a huge amount of water that's actually collected in roof drains. Usually because of all these type of the buildings, the roof leaders are inside the building, they go directly to the basement and they connect to the same pipe. It's hard for us to invest the public money into the private properties and go make changes to the building, but we were taking consideration adding additional pipe under the sidewalk in the future when any future grants is applicable for the public, for private citizens. They can apply and they would connect themselves with the roof leaders directly to the pipe, which is going to be separated from sanitary sewer. I mean, is this a little bit confusing? But any questions on this part?
Yes, is this the right?
Yes, what you have right now, just to give you an example, in Utica, in downtown, we have two problems. One, it's runoffs off of the street, of the parking lots. That's easy to deal with in this case. The problem that we have is the building itself. High-rise buildings usually have a roof. When the roof goes on top of the roof, usually it's a flat roof, their gutters are not in the outside, they're in the middle of the building. They go directly down in the middle of the building to the basement and they connect themselves together with sanitary sewer. We cannot go directly in the building, maybe Osage, it would be so expensive, but we are taking consideration, let's separate it now on Genesee Street, what we have right now, and think in the future, some said, what about roofs and how we can address this issue. We are planning ahead and saying, okay, we're going to leave the pipe under the sidewalk on each side in case in a future development something happens that we can be ready, because we are going to disturb such a huge amount of sidewalks. It would be a good idea to plan for the future and just leave the pipe there and wait for a future development. But what we have right now, in this case, it's a residential home, but in the downtown, usually this pipe is in the middle. It connects itself right here, and they go, in this example, they connect and they go to the one pipe. And this is kind of overflow. Combined sewer goes to the plant, reaches its maximum, the gate shut off, and there's another gate that opens here, directs the flow, and goes directly to the Mohawk River. I mean, it's a huge, I mean, we have to comply with this. There's no chance with us not to comply because DC, the regulations, telling us to do so. Excuse me?
I have a question.
Yes.
You're separating the drain and the sewage.
That's correct.
How far are they going to go with that, with this project?
How far?
How far down, Jeff? To the bridge?
No. What's happening? We have another pipe we applied. It's a two-part grant. If the other pipe that's going to go from the bottom of Genesee Street, we are going to go across on Elizabeth and try to connect ourselves to Blue Creek. That pipe itself is approximate estimates was $1.4 million. We are trying to avoid, that's our first option. If elevations works out fine and everything is designed correctly, we should be able to hit that. Our second option is actually to drill under the railroad, which is more expensive, and we are trying to avoid that. That's a couple of different options. We want to go all the way to the plant.
Okay,
That's
it just didn't make, because you're showing us two pipes, and then
yes. Two pipes.
are they going to stay
would go all the way
separate?
down.
Well, I guess
They're going to stay separate the whole way. That's the whole point.
To the sewage plant
Yeah.
and to wherever you're going to dump it.
If I keep them separate to the whole way and I put them back together on bottom of Genesee Street, I mean, it's a good for now, but I still haven't done, I still have the second portion of
This is complying with the DEC within the county.
with the county. What we are trying to stay ahead of the game, and actually, when you apply for the grant, we have to do this no matter what. I would rather see this work being done with a grant than with the, the city taking the burden and so on and investing such a huge expense.
So not only are we going to dig up the streets, we're going to dig up the sidewalks too.
We were trying to do the sidewalk to make it better, not because if
But in order that you're going to dig up the sidewalks too.
yes, we would like to dig up the sidewalks and put the brand new sidewalks near new crossings. I mean, if the sidewalk, let me put it this way, if the sidewalk is brand new and it's good shape, we are not going to touch it. But if it is,
Seated.
or it's heated, and let's say some of the sections you can see, if you can stand up, let's say example on in front of the savings bank, in front of the bank, you might try. Some of the, that's why it's such a, it's not a uniform design to the whole Genesee Street. Some of the old basements would come under the sidewalk. We have to take that into consideration. It's going to be actually be block by block design. And we would take all this in consideration and go from there. We took that in consideration. Some of the questions were about basement, heated sidewalks and all that. We had regular meetings. We took some of your advice into consideration, made some adjustments to the plan. It's a plan that's constantly is developing, it's growing, it's changing. because it's not definite, it's just a preliminary design. But that's where we are right now.
How long is this going to take?
To be honest with you, our projection is probably 2 years, but what the grant itself saying we should be done in 18 months. Even though that I did plead my case saying, you know, it's an urban development, it's really hard to complete this in 18 months, but they're saying that's one of the grant requirements, and I will see if we can, how we can work with that. That was one of the 18 months.
And how much of Genesee Street is going to be torn up for that 18 months?
It'll be a section at a time. It won't be the entire length of Genesee Street. What we'll do is before, and again, I don't want to speak above or beyond, but as we get into the final, if we're awarded the money, then what we'll do is determine block by block exactly what the plan is going to be and roughly how long that's going to be until we go to the next block. So it's not infringing on the entire length of the Genesee Street from one point to the other point.
Usually in any part when you do construction, you have to take consideration accessibility. Usually what you would do, you take block at a time, make sure that everything accessible, finish that block, and move to the next block. Because you cannot close the whole Genesee Street and says, we are shut down for 18 months. That's not how it works. It would be, there's an option saying, let's do half, then half, maybe move the traffic from, you know, one way and make it to the left, one way each way, then move it to the right side. That's a being, but we can once when we start to do into detailed design, we're going to make a decision what would be the best possible option. Not just for us. For us, the easiest way is actually to close the Genesee Street. Then tore everything up and do it, but that's not how it works. You have to take consideration businesses, hours. Is it, you know, is it going to be open for holidays, St. Patrick's Parade, Boilermaker? All that has to be taken into consideration when you're putting the RFP for proposal. You know, same with any other project. Full leaf fronts, you know.
Obviously, you're talking about both sides of the street.
Yes. There's an option saying one block, or somebody was saying maybe we should do half a block, one side and half a block, the other side, still being accessible.
One of the things I think we will do also is we've talked to Schenectady and other areas that have already done it and are currently doing it, is to determine what path was the least costly and what it was best for the merchants at the same time. However, let's be quite frank and honest, whether we do the medium or we don't, at some point, I think what Warren's saying, we have to, by mandate, we're going to have to do something with the stormwater and sanitary. So whether it comes out of our pocket and we have to bond for it, or we're successful with a grant at this point, at some point, sometime, the separation of the sanitary and the storm sewer within the whole city of Utica, you just looked at what we've done over on the west side. I think that's one of the reasons why we're not under a mandate, because we've been successful with some of these grants and we're showing that we are doing the right separating. So we're not really under the gun as much as some other municipalities are.
But they're constantly, we have a long-term control plan that you have to comply with. We would send, to DC and EPA, they would have to review it, and they have to see that we are actually doing something to comply with these laws and regulations. I mean, it's not just we have think about it, it's just sometimes people, I know that it costs money, but sometimes people have a moral obligation to do something about this. We cannot ignore all these problems and wait till somebody else down the road do something about it. If you want to protect the Mohawk River and just by protecting that, we are saving money ourselves, because the water that doesn't have to be treated, you're paying to be treated at the plant right now. And I mean, if you can do that, invest some money and do as much, yes.
Mentioned, the aim of the project largely is infrastructure related, to separate the storm and sanitary sewer. But while that construction is being done, the plan is to take advantage of that construction work, and when the street, the sidewalk, the curbing, everything goes back in place, to put something that's updated. The current streetscape is tired, it's old, it's been the same way it is now for the last 50, 60 years, and we're looking to really change the aesthetics and bring a a freshness to the Genesee Street corridor. So we are looking at road diet design, narrowing the street from 4 lanes to 2, with a center turning lane or a median where appropriate. And in addition to the median, we'd also look at the redesign of the sidewalks between the curb and the buildings, looking at such things as benches, pavers, additional landscaping, lighting, those types of amenities for the businesses as well as the pedestrians.
Everyone's side?
If I can say, this is what you have existing right now at the top part. But what it says here, 11 feet, is actually being generous. In some parts, it's 9, 10 feet. Actually, here it's never 8. Right now, it's 7, 6 feet. If you notice when you drive in Genesee Street, the cars who are parking on the right side, and pay attention to the white lane, it's always across that lane, which means there's not enough sufficient parking space for the car to be there. Actually, Genesee Street should be 2-way each way without parking, but they jam the parking inside and reduce the width of the lanes. That's why constantly when you're driving, people are creeping into each other. You cannot have 2 cars and a park. It's kind of always moving left, kind of skipping the parked car on the side. Especially during the snow and storm, you really have actually 1 way each way. But what we are proposing here is actually, this can vary. We can have here 11, 12 feet to 8 feet this way and 5 feet bike lane. The reason why we have a bike lane is 2-way, makes it more city-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and actually gives you more space in an emergency that you can maneuver with the vehicles. In case if this car has to pull on the side, the other car can drive around it in case of an emergency.
And hit a bicycle.
I mean, you can hit bicycles too, right? No, but that would be, you know, all the regular movements to the left are allowed, as you can see on the plan that you have it right now. And
one of the biggest questions that we've received since we've unveiled the plan is concern about the median. And I think people look at the rendering that was done for the master plan and see trees down the median. That's not necessarily the way it's going to be. As Goran and the mayor have mentioned, as we get into more detailed design and engineering, we'll go on a block-by-block basis and look at the specific design of the median itself. And there's different types of medians. In the graphic on the top, the median is level with the street and is just delineated by pavers and painting. In this photograph, it's a mountable curb so that public safety vehicles could drive across if necessary, with no landscaping and just a hard surface. And these two show some landscaping from a minimal amount, low maintenance, to a higher level of maintenance. So this is really intended to show that there's a wide range of designs for the median. If you look at the graphic that we have up here, I think there's a lot of concern out there that the median is going to be one single strip running from Oriskany Boulevard to Oneida Square. And if you look at what we presented up here, you'll see that that's not the case. It's a fairly well balanced between a center turning lane, which still allows for efficient movement of traffic so that there isn't that congestion that people are concerned with, and the aesthetics of a median.
One of the things that we haven't touched on is when we talk about buses, and we see the congestion now with the buses over here, before the multimodal is going to be up and running, and they're really on a busy corner, they're congesting it. That no longer will be. They will be taking that off and putting it into the multimodal. So the opening in Bleecker Street will be much cleaner than it is at this point. And also, my understanding is they're going to be taking some of the bus shelters off.
yes,
Okay.
because they're not, no, because
Because of that. So, I mean, it's kind of like we're putting a lot of planning into this, but it's kind of the domino effect. It's kind of coming in place well with the multimodal along with this. And I think once you come up here later on and you actually view where the medium is going to be and where you see the turning lanes and how it's really put together. That fear that I think has been out there is that you're gonna see a wall from one end to the other end. It's not where it's at. So just later on, you take a look at it. There, it shows you a little bit of a conceptual over there, what it looks like, and that's authentically, that's Utica. That's us.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
If you're gonna take away the bus stops,
We're not. It's not us, it's Central.
okay, so they're gonna take away the bus stops.
Right.
So people that would normally perhaps use the buses to come downtown,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna put them over here. That's where you're gonna drop them, over here, no longer on Genesee Street?
No. They're gonna drop down at their, whatever the stations may be.
They're going to still have one in 258, they're going to have that location for buses,
Okay.
but there is no reason to have one in front of the APAC building,
Franklin, APAC.
when you can just walk and wait there and hit the building.
The buses will still make a stop if a provider requests it.
What are the Federal Disabilities Act, what are their requirements? Because you're forcing people, it seems, to come from APAC all the way up here, and there's some days I have to walk with 2 canes, my legs are so bad, and the other handicap. What are the requirements? Because this city is not exactly handicap friendly. Currently, there's 1 parking place per block for handicapped vehicles. That's it. And I can take you out and show them all, every block on Genesee Street, between Oriskany Boulevard and Oneida Street. 1 per block. And there's many people who get out of buses who are handicapped, who get off and went to sandwich shops, Key Bank, and the existing businesses there that are financially marginal now, that when this construction starts, what kind of accommodations are going to be made for these businesses to continue? Terry came from the Triangle, couldn't make it tonight. He's still preparing the meals for tomorrow at his coffee shop. But there's a place that they're operating marginally, as is the barber shop that I went to next to the Y, and he figures within a month after starting construction in his block, they'll just close. He won't be able to make it financially. But is there any accommodations, one for the handicap, and forcing them to come to a central bus stop, and 2, what about handicap parking? What are the federal requirements on a thoroughfare to provide in each block? Currently you have 1, which I don't think meets minimal disabilities.
To answer your first question, again, the bus shelters are what's being eliminated on Genesee Street. The bus will still stop. If a passenger rings the bell and asks that the bus stop, the bus will still stop. What's being eliminated is the bus shelters. So they won't be, the buses won't be congregating at the busy corner. You won't have a collection of bus stops with people waiting. The waiting area is going to be in the multimodal center.
How do we get a handicap?
But you'll still be able to get on and off a bus on Genesee Street.
Okay.
To answer your second question, where the city is going to have to hire a professional engineering firm to go through a detailed design. They will know the standards and the metrics that are required both by federal law as well as state law relative to handicap parking, and we will make sure that we are consistent in our design with those federal requirements.
Right. What about your marginal financial businesses now? They're operating, some of them by the skin of their teeth. During this construction, I'm amazed that the guy on Erie Street with the automotive shop was able to continue in business. But some of these shops, the barber and the coffee shop, they're dependent on pedestrian traffic. And if you tear up the sidewalks in the street in 1 block, for all intents and purposes, those businesses are at their edge financially. Are we going to push them over and make them close, or what?
Again, we'll work with the professional engineering firm that we bring on to do the detailed design and make sure that when the bid documents are developed, that every effort is made to shorten and limit the time that each block is going to be disturbed. Really, that's the best we can do.
I don't want to, regarding Dan Erie Street, we made all of his requests regarding the closing of the street. It was according to his request, the reason why he closed the street. Make it close because he wanted us to close the street. He says it's easier for his business, the people are not driving and they don't raise as much dust because I do the detail shop. It's not because we wanted to close the street. Just to clarify that, even if he said that.
Yeah, but once you start,
And we are commenting
once you start construction,
Yes.
where I work, I have a business, so does that. You're taking away our parking, you're taking away our accessibility for people to come and do business with us. I've got to believe, because I've gone through it once already, that you're talking 2 or 3 months, even if you do it section by section. It's very questionable whether we could sustain 2 or 3 months of no customers. So then that, in essence, that leaves us one other alternative.
During the construction,
Why would you not have why would we be able to accommodate?
Well, first of all, you're going to be doing construction. You're going to
Okay.
tear up whatever, right?
Okay.
So that takes care of that side of the street.
Okay.
Now you're going to bring material down, correct? And you're going to have to put that somewhere.
But are we that unique that this isn't done all over the country?
Well, you know what, Mayor? I watched them do our sidewalks.
Right.
We're going to take 2 weeks. A month later, and I think I said this at one meeting, a month later, they still hadn't finished. I had planks. There was no parking, period. So my customers obviously are not going to walk over planks, or there's nowhere for them to park.
I'll
And
say this.
parking is a scarce and rare thing down
The
there.
only thing I can say to you at this point, when it comes to the final, if we're successful, whether it be the medium or non-medium, I think we all understand this at this point, at some time, someplace, we have to do this.
I understand that.
And quite frankly, it's to the point where it's almost mandated to separate the two of them. If we get this grant, the only thing I can say to you is that we'll work with you the best we can possibly do, whether we do the medium or we don't. But if there is construction, there's no easy way to get away from it, and we'll try to accommodate it. And I go back to the same old analogy. If you did your kitchen over or you remodeled, there is a certain amount of disturbance. It's natural. But,
My kitchen, I go out to dinner.
well, some people can't afford to go out to
business,
dinner.
you know.
Some people can't
gotta
afford to
be
go out to dinner.
concerned about my business.
And we are concerned.
And
You-
that's what scares me.
we're
You
doing
have
this.
no idea how this scares me.
Listen, if we weren't concerned, we would be moving on. What we were trying to do is not only sustain where you are, but be able to grow and flourish and have other pockets of retail coming in there. What we're looking for is the rebirth of the downtown area with the advent of the harbor, with the advent of potentially the nanotech. This is our time. And if we're fortunate enough to get this grant, we have to embrace it. If not, you got 2 members of the Common Council here, we would have to DEC comes in with this mandate, we'd have to go out and bond, and we can't bond. Whether it be 3 years now or 4 years, at some point, it's over 100 years that this has gone on to this level. I mean, and I understand there is pain. I understand. There's pain no matter what there is. And I can't tell you it won't end. There will be some pain. The only thing I can tell you is that we will work with you as much as possible and reassure it whatever we can. It's not foolproof, but I can just tell you we'll do anything in our power, because what I don't want to see is Ed or you closing down. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to be vibrant and someone to say, when you're ready to retire, it's a viable business, maybe we could go into that business. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for growing the city of Utica. Not being stagnant and saying, you know, only in Utica we can't do this. Only in Utica we can do this. And there's fear with change. I understand that. I understand that.
It's more reality than fear. But I understand sewers have got to be done, but it just scares me at the way they're going to go about it, that's all.
The only thing I could do,
And the media scares me, we haven't got to that point.
One of the other issues, aside from the median that has been raised on a consistent basis since we unveiled the plan, is the concept of the road diet, narrowing Genesee Street from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. There are numerous studies that have been conducted nationally regarding road diets. 99 out of 100 have all shown that they generally provide a benefit to the area in which they're located. They allow for a more efficient movement of traffic, because traffic is controlled by the most prudent instead of the least prudent, which is how you have it currently on Genesee Street now. It provides for safer conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists, which leads to more foot traffic, more economic development, and that hence increase property values. Most of the studies conclude that road diets work best on roadways with no more than 20,000 vehicles per day, based on a 2010 DOT study. Genesee Street between Oriskany and South Street had less than 9,000 vehicles per day. So we're confident, short of a full-blown traffic study, that this plan will still allow for the efficient movement of traffic. The third project goal, and the one that hasn't gotten as much press as the conversion of Genesee Street, is the implementation of a parking plan. The mayor talked about it a little bit. The city's had money since roughly 2005 to address parking, funding provided by the state, and various solutions have been discussed, but nothing's ever been put forward. This plan addresses how we intend to spend that $5.25 million to address parking in the downtown. And there's 5 primary goals. One is to replace the 90-minute free parking in strategically located areas of the downtown with pay stations. Second is to develop strategically located surface parking lots to further develop and entice private development that we believe is close to occurring. The third goal is to evaluate 3 alternative sites for the construction of a parking deck or decks. And then improve enforcement of all parking regulations, both on-street and off-street, as well as establish a signage program, as I mentioned earlier, for all public parking areas. I have that at the end.
Okay.
We can. In terms of the pay stations, again, we are looking at eliminating or replacing the 90-minute free parking as it currently exists on various streets, largely located around the state and county office building, with pay stations. The graphic you have in front of you is a picture of a typical pay station. For those of you who may not be familiar with how it works, you generally park your car in a space along the street, walk up to one of these pay stations. There's generally 1 or 2 located in each block. Put in the money for the amount of time that you expect to be parked there, and the pay station puts out a receipt. You then take the receipt, take it to your car, put it on the dashboard of your car, and the traffic enforcement officer can walk along and look at the receipt that's in each of the vehicles.
I want to ask you a question. What would be the length of time to be able to park?
You select the amount of time that you expect to be there.
So you could park all day if you wanted.
If you pay the amount, yes. It's generally based on
It's very similar to what you have in Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, throughout. It's a pay station. You got that little receipt?
Yep.
Yeah, you just.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's very similar. And the difference, the technology would be much more advanced technology than they currently are using at this time.
Current technology that the mayor talks about, the pay stations would accept coins, cash, credit card, and even some are starting to accept cell phones.
But again, you could park all day if you chose.
Correct. Again, if you pay the required fee, and it's going to be cheaper. The point to the pay stations is that it's going to be cheaper for people who are going to park all day, such as state and county office workers, to park in one of the city's public lots, such as the Union Blandina lot, or in one of the parking garages. So though it hasn't been determined yet exactly how much the pay stations are going to be, they're going to be priced in such a way that it makes sense for those long-term parkers to park in public lots and garages, rather than being on the street, which is really meant for customers.
And what you can do also, Paul, is you can incentivize it. For example, if they come in, they purchase something, if you want to give them a free pass, we can program some different varieties in there to continue to make them, to stimulate them to come down with a free pass, whatever it may be. And it could be, if we're having a summer sale or whatever, it's programmable. So it's something that we could adjust as we're going. Again, it's not carved into exactly, it could be at night, there may not be parking fee, or there may be. It all is going to be based on with the input we're receiving from a lot of the merchants. But again, the pay stations have been very successful. what we're looking for is freeing up the parking spaces specifically for some of the state office use in the county to free up parking spaces. And what we did say, with the overall downtown plan, we have actually added not a lot of parking spaces, but parking spaces, additional parking spaces. Yes, Bill?
Yeah, you were talking earlier, you mentioned something about parking decks. Now, where would you,
We'll get, we're not there yet.
All right.
We'll certainly talk about
okay.
that aspect of it. Yes?
I just have a comment to make about these meter stations. Since this proposal has come about, and I'm not quite sure how long it's been, 6, 8 weeks, I'm going to just tell you the feedback that I'm getting from my patients that come into my office. They hate it, Mayor. They hate it. They hate the idea of paid stations. I'm getting nothing but negative comments about it. Quite honestly, I have not heard one person say one thing positive about it. I have concerns because I've been in business 31 years. I brought this up at the last meeting. I'm going to bring it up again. For anyone that doesn't know me in this room, I'm Ed Lasik. I own Ed Lasik Optical. And I have 31 years in business. My patients that were 50 years old back then are now 81. And I have concerns for them. Because they pull up, they're going to have to get to a meter station to try to get a tag for their car. I don't know how that's going to be humanly possible for them to do. And I know what's going to happen is I'm going to end up leaving my place of business to accommodate them to get tags for their cars. I can't see how that's going to be advantageous to my business in any way, shape, or form. The young people that come into my business, they're saying the same thing. That's ridiculous. You know, I hate those things. And I'm just giving feedback from what people are telling me. The middle-aged patients are saying the same exact thing. I have not heard one positive about these meter stations. That's a big fear of mine, because I could see people that would normally come down and find a parking place and say, well, geez, let me pull over and run in. Now they're saying to themselves, well, I got to park the hell with it. And they will say that. I've been there 31 years and we had the meters. People hated them too. They despised them. And I understand that the city's trying to move forward on a lot of things. And again, I applaud the mayor and your administration. I think you're doing a lot of beautiful things and you're working very hard. But if you could take a second look at these meter stations, I would greatly appreciate it.
We'll take a second look.
Because my patients are not going to like it. And I don't mean to sound selfish here, but it's definitely not going to work for my business. Definitely not. And I've heard it time and time again. I'm not in favor of those at all.
One of the things that you will be creating by putting paid parking in downtown is that every mall operator with free parking will immediately see an opportunity to advertise the fact that they have free parking. And they will immediately use that to their advantage.
We're talking about retail, correct?
Yes, at the different retail malls, New Hartford, Whitestown, Riverside, they will begin, it's as night as day, it will come, using every advantage that they have to combat the move to downtown retailing, downtown retail shopping or business shopping, whatever else, by advertising the fact that they have free parking where we do not. That's just an observation, but as an advertising fellow, they're going to use, I know they're going to use everything in their power to keep their business, and that's one very facile way that they will have. It will happen.
I mean, but on that note, considering that we all agree on one thing, that right now you cannot park on Genesee Street during the day. And mainly the reason is state and county employees, they're using most of the parking and they're moving cars from one side to another side. Am I right?
Yes, you're right.
I parked on Genesee Street today. I parked on Genesee Street.
My question is, how would you, I mean, if you had something to enforce, how would you?
Well, let's wait. Let's not get into the, he said, whatever, maybe their study has been done, there's a need for parking, there's a need for everything that we're talking about at this point. It's just, where do we get to something that's applicable to everybody? And we probably won't get to, because one person's gonna say, I want the parking stations, and the next person's gonna, so we're taking all the input that you're saying, and before we make a final decision, we're digesting everything. We're gonna look at other areas such as Syracuse, where they've been successful, and get the feedback from them, and then we'll make a decision. But I think one thing we all could agree to, that we do need some type of change. Because the downtown area, for multiple years, has not been a flourishing downtown. Okay, so knowing that, we can't stay the same. Some things have to change. We have to give the people who are not coming downtown a reason to invest downtown. Whether it be in engineering, attorneys, whatever is applicable for what we have municipal government, we have to give them a reason to come downtown. It's inviting. And then when you do that, it's going to spur on more economic growth because you'll have little pockets of some retail, and hopefully, Ed and Paul, your business will grow. This is the whole reason why we're doing this, is to stimulate the activity so people want to come into a clean, safe, different, well-lit, well-signaged area that they can invest into. So everything that you're saying here is going, and we're consuming it, we're understanding it, because I think when you look at what we've done, as we're going along and talking to other people, we are making some changes even before we go to the final draft. This is not the final draft. This is getting ideas and thoughts. We talked to DOT. They told us some ideas. We talked to National Grid. We talked to Central. We've talked to business team. So we're taking everything and putting it in. But I don't want you to understand at this point, everybody's got their great ideas. But we can't, not everyone's going to be happy. That's all I'm saying. But we're going to listen to as many people as we can, because at the end of the day, we want this to be our one shot that we have to grow downtown once again.
With that being said, about talking to the merchants,
Yes.
why hasn't anyone come to talk to us?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was downtown. I've talked to a number of merchants.
On this specific issue?
Yeah.
Okay, no one's come to our block.
That's what we're here for,
Okay.
right now.
Mr. Chairman, if I heard you correctly, this plan is on a block-by-block planning stage. And from what I heard, I think I heard you say that you were entertaining the idea of paid parking in front of the county office building and the state office building. Doesn't that leave room for leaving Mr. Lasic's block without paid parking?
Well, it would be Genesee Street, and it would be in that where we met. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Again, what we're looking at is overall concept, and that's what I'm saying. We're going to look at the concept, and as we go further into the parking, whether I have a joint venture with the state or the county, we're hoping at that point it's going to free up the areas of the parking that the state is coming out and absorbing, coming out every 90 minutes. The whole concept is not just Genesee Street, it's parking, it's Genesee Street, it's the water, it's the image, it's the safety, it's the rebirth of downtown, and it's putting all these things into one that is going to be fulfilling all the concerns that everybody's talked about and has done nothing about. So that's where we are. I mean, I don't want to tell you at this point, there's not going to be, you don't have to worry about a pay station, because at this point, I'm not 100% sure where they're going to be and how they're going to be. But the pay stations have been extremely successful in Syracuse, in Cooperstown. I talked to the mayor in Cooperstown, who is, you know, he just said everybody was against that, but it was probably the best thing he's ever done. So, again, it's change, and we certainly will come and talk to you. Brian is going to be going out and talking to everybody. I've been out and talking to a number of people on Genesee Street. Maybe I didn't hit you, but I've certainly been walking the block multiple times. I mean, and you can pick up the phone at any time, Paul. I'll come over and talk to you. But I mean, I'm not that far away.
Yeah, but then again, we have parking rules and regulations that could take care of the situation that we have down there. 90-minute parking, you get it.
Not with the state and county office.
Well, they park on the street, they're.
And they move their cars every 90 minutes, and they're still occupying space that really isn't meant for them. It's
Paul,
meant
we'll
for
sit
your
and talk,
customers.
we'll talk, because, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
what I want to do is I want to continue to go into so we can ask more questions.
We're also proposing to develop 5 strategically located surface lots, off-street parking areas throughout the downtown. This is the first lot. It's the former HSBC parking lot, necessary to encourage the revitalization and reuse of the former HSBC, the Harza building, and other key anchor buildings in the downtown. The second lot is at the southern end, what we're calling the Oriskany Boulevard lot. It's at the southern end of the block, currently occupied primarily by Smith Packing. The city owns a number of lots in there. Development of this lot would help with auto events, as well as some development that is underway within the Bag Square West area. The third lot is along Whitesboro Street, on the north side of Whitesboro Street at the northern end of Lower Genesee Street. Was previously occupied by a business called Horick Ibbotson. You're all aware, I think, that we've seen quite a bit of development along Lower Genesee Street with Master Pizza, Taylor & Cook, and a number of other businesses that have just recently opened up there. There's additional development that we expect in that area. We've talked with all the business owners. They've cited parking as a necessity. And when we ask them what they view as the most viable option, all of them come back to this particular lot. The city does own all the parcels. There is some minor remediation that needs to be done, but it's a lot that could conceivably hold upwards of 100 cars. The fourth lot, again, named for a former business that was located there, former Big Daddy's parking lot, corner of Bleecker and John. This development of this lot supports some development that has been occurring over the past several years on Bleecker Street, and is a fulfillment of a commitment that was made by the previous administration to develop a public parking lot at this site. The fifth lot is the Bleecker Street lot, next to the multimodal center right across the street. Again, this lot really serves 2 purposes. It's fairly small, so it won't accommodate any more than 8 to 10 vehicles, but it will also reestablish Post Street, which was a one-way alley running between Burnett and Charlotte Street. That was closed and dead-ended with the construction of the multimodal center across the street. As part of the design of this lot, we would propose reconnecting Post Street as a one-way alley to Bleecker Street. We had also mentioned the evaluation of 3 alternative sites for a possible parking deck. Mayor, did you want to?
We could get in, yeah, let's talk about the options that we have at this point. Did everybody see this pretty well? And through here. The first, let me just back up. January, when I came into administration, we started putting things together. The first thing I did is that there's been talking about a parking garage, parking substations. There's been talking about surface lots throughout the entire city, but really nothing ever transpired out of it. What I wanted to do is, once and for all, make sure we had the money that was allocated to it, secure it, and then entertain into, the county has a parking problem, so did the state. So I summoned both the county executive and OGS. We sat down, and I thought that maybe if we could partner, it would be feasible for all of us, all the taxpayers, to do one joint venture. As it turns out, what has happened, is that the county executive decided that the best possible site for him would be in his campus, which is B, over on off of Elizabeth Street, and acquiring properties and putting his parking into that. OGS would not entertain doing either B or C because they had site control, they owned it, they wouldn't deviate from that. So C is an option that was talked about plenty of times along Charlotte Street. So our option now, the city, is to look at partnering either with the county executive or OGS at the state office site, or doing it on our own over on C. We do not have the numbers. The initial numbers were if we partnered with the county executive, it would come into the deck. It would be initially the least costly. I have not had the final numbers to determine that. We're talking roughly 150 spaces, and the cost we're talking about it. The concern that I have if I partner with OGS at this point, it is a garage. And there is a maintenance cost with a garage. And we're having a very difficult time maintaining our garages at this point. So I'm looking for, A, if they are going to fulfill the obligation of maintaining it, or it's going to be our responsibility. That number has not come back to us. And C would be, again, the city of Utica going on their own. I've talked to a couple of the owners over here. The spaces would be roughly 118 spaces, and the cost would be several $1 million. The least at this point seems to be B. Bill, to your point, that would be a deck. That would be a deck that we would have. A would be a parking garage. We're talking roughly 200 spaces. And once again, C would be just surface parking because the deck over here would be much more costly. And to pick up roughly 48 spaces, I don't think it's feasible for the city.
I just want to explain something. As a government employee, we don't have, our offices don't open until 8:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have to get there like 7:30, quarter to 8 just to find a parking spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how bad it is.
Right. No, I understand. And I think, quite frankly, I think the county executive understands that. And I certainly hope that OGS understands it, because some of the problems with the parking is attributed to there's not enough parking. And in this facility, how often do we go by there and it's kind of bare? So the other option may be potentially down the road, if we did partner with the county here, this may be an opportunity for economic development down the road. We would look at that option as developing that, because in turn, this wouldn't be it. But until we have the cost, which we have not, it's difficult to say A, B, or C. We're going to try to get the biggest bang for our dollar and for the least maintenance down the road, because with the deck, the maintenance won't be nearly as high as on the parking garage. So that's the options that we have at this point. You can see the proximity to Genesee Street. We also talked about over and through here, making a one-way, which would increase, obviously, additional parking.
What about the state office building? There used to be some kind of parking lot in the back.
That's what we're talking about.
This
Yeah, this is A. This is the parking, which used to be a parking garage. I believe it was a 4-story or 5-story.
I don't know.
Yes, and then it was taken down.
Yeah.
Well, it was. It just got to the point where maintenance, they didn't want to put the dollars and cents into it. They knocked it down, and now at this point, just surface parking at this point. That's the partnering with this. This would be partnering with the state, the city and the state. This would be the city and the county if we partner, and this would be C, the city of Utica on its own. That's the three options that we have at this point, along with, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 6 up into this area, which is the smaller ones. This replicates what Brian has shown you also, these other areas.
And in the back of the old Hotel Utica, there used to be some kind of a garage.
Yes. Right. There's only X amount of dollars.
So, but I mean, that can't be utilized.
Well, yeah, if we have more money, we can utilize it. But again, to the point of the downtown need for the parking at this point, the advent of the Harza building, we've got some other people very much interested in this area. We're getting a lot more interest in downtown again. It's been relatively hot at this point, but parking has always been, again, a concern and a problem. It's not designated, it's not clearly defined, it's not bright. So this is putting everything that we've talked about into one program, which we feel is going to be beneficial to the future of our downtown area, and more importantly, to the taxpayers, because it will be job growth and increased revenue. Any questions on any of these? This parking?
We love the idea, Mayor. I mean,
You got one we agree on.
one definite.
Okay. Well, then, again, that's the whole concept. Is, you know, we'll take a piece from that, and I can't give you a clear of A, B, or C where it is until I get the numbers. The initial number we got here, I got that initial number from the county executive, and I would have went with that one, but it's changing. So until such time that I get a firm number.
I think it's about time we did start addressing the downtown issue. That's great.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
The next three slides really talk about each of the individual options. Again, this is A behind the state office building. Our preliminary number, our preliminary estimate is that the city share would be $3 million for roughly 200 spaces within that garage. Again, there's a savings to the city because the state owns the property. We don't have to acquire the property or do any demolition. In a similar manner, the county's moving ahead with what we show as Plan B on their own currently. Again, their cost is in acquiring the property, demolishing the buildings that are on those properties. So there is a cost savings there to the city as well for this particular option. The early number that we have for construction for the city share is 1.1. Again, that's not, that's changing for roughly 150 vehicles. The diagram at the bottom shows you something of what a deck would look like. Again, I believe the county executive's plan is to park on the upper tier. So if the city partners with them, the city parking would be on the lower tier. If the city chooses a different option and does not participate in this, you'll essentially see an 8-foot high wall along Elizabeth Street. And then the third option, as the mayor talked about, option C, is a collection of largely privately owned properties between Devereaux, Elizabeth, and Charlotte Street. Because we're not partnering with the state or the county for this option, it would be up to the city to purchase the property, do any asbestos, oil tank removal, demolition. So there's an added cost. This is, well, the location is probably, of the three, the most preferable. It's also the highest cost.
And just so we clearly understand, this I believe is the Devereaux, is not part of it, and also on Elizabeth Street that was abstract, that is not part of it also. That would not be one of the acquisitions that we would be looking at. It would be just about everything else that's in there, plus with some of the buildings that we currently own.
Improving it as a surface lot, which is the top number. We've estimated about 118 vehicles could be accommodated on that lot. We also looked at the possibility of constructing half a parking deck. If you look at the entire block, the slope of the lot from Devereaux to Elizabeth would facilitate the construction of half a deck. But again, the construction cost to pick up 40 vehicles is fairly high.
Question on these parking garages. We have cost per vehicle for construction. Is there any projected cost for snow removal, maintenance, and for personnel to clean and attend the garage during the day? In other words, what are the yearly costs per vehicle?
As the mayor said, his discussions with the state, OGS, we've asked for how they would view maintenance of a facility that they would own. What would the city's responsibility be? That's still being worked
clear
out.
on that. We're waiting to hear back. And in reference to the surface parking lot, if we do it on our own, it would be the same as we're currently doing on our own parking facilities at this point.
Isn't it more expensive on a parking deck to do snow removal? You'd have to bucket it and load it on dump trucks and remove it?
Well, once again, that would only be, we wouldn't have a deck. I think it was clearly identified with the county. They would take the deck, we'd take the bottom portion.
Somebody, one of the taxpayers has to pay for the snow removal.
Oh, no, there's no question about it. Unless they put a heated concrete in it. Yeah, there's always there's a cost. And if we talk about some of the other surface parking lots, once we have them, we're going to be responsible for these.
Why are the existing parking garages in a hard way? They're not being used?
Yeah,
Financially?
They're being used in a hard way is the fact that it's like anything else. And you got two members of the common council here. Budget constraints are very tight. There hasn't been a real strong preventive maintenance over the years. And instead of addressing them, you put them off until the point where it takes a tremendous amount of money. It's just, and that's my concern, going with another garage. The city has to incorporate that. It's just the way it is. I mean, there's less money available to maintain these. And
people prefer open lots to garages anymore. I've had that experience in Syracuse. I could bore you with all the detail. The simple fact is, people prefer open parking lots to garages.
Well, that's a debate for another time.
This graphic really is similar to what the one next to the mayor. It really shows the streets that we're proposing for pay stations, the 3 alternative parking deck locations, as well as the 5 surface lots, all in relation to each other. Finally, again, as we mentioned, part of the plan includes comprehensive public parking signage program, as well as increased enforcement. And some of that increased enforcement has already begun. You may have seen the news article on the parking enforcement officer who has significantly increased enforcement over the last several months. The final slide just talks about the project funding. Again, through the state, money that's already in place and available for use to improve downtown parking is the $5.26 million. The city has submitted an application to the Economic Development Administration requesting $8 million for the sewer work on Genesee Street. And the city did submit applications for sewer work as well as the Genesee streetscape. The applications together totaled more than $3 million. However, the state, in their announcement relative to Mohawk Valley Regional Economic Development Council's plan, the city was successful in receiving $400,000 for the sewers and $250,000 for the streetscape, for a total of $0.65 million. So the total project cost at this point is $13.91 million.
Mayor, where are we going to get the difference at this point, now that we know we only got that smaller amount of state money? Where is the difference going to come from?
The state, for the federal, the matching on the federal grant?
No. The state, we only got $250,000 from the state. We were supposed to get multiple millions of dollars originally, so there's a shortfall already. Where is the shortfall going to come from?
We'll take a look at additional funding sources that may be out there.
Is CDBG one of the funding sources?
In all likelihood, no.
I don't think so.
Because unfortunately, a lot of CDBG money, because of the overages on the roundabout, we used up a lot of our CDBG funds that could have been used in our neighborhood projects, as you know.
Well, let me make it real clear at this point, Councilman. As you know where I am with the CDBG, I want, and HUD wants exact what we're going to do so there could be an improvements. I'm not going to use that money allocated for our plan at this point. So if there's shortness, that means we may not be able to do some of the different things. However, there may be additional funding out there that we'll hope to secure. And quite frankly, that $8 million may not be $8 million. I mean, these are things we're applying for. It may be more. I don't know. But I would say at this point, if we didn't apply for this, if we said, well, we don't want this money, it could either go to Binghamton or it could go to Texas or someplace else. We're trying to do is get our fair share at this point. And to Brian's credit and Gordon's credit, they did an outstanding job to the point where Congressman Hanna wrote us a letter in support of this and the work that they put into it. So even though we didn't get what we were looking for from the CFA Regional Council, I can't tell you how many didn't even get to the point of going to the level of being a top priority. So it's not what we were looking for, but at least we've got to be acknowledged that they're looking at this, and then next year that'll be part of the CFA once again, because the downtown, the harbor, the corridor that we're talking about at this point is the lifeline of the city and the rebirth.
And councilors, you well know, the most important part in the process of seeking out funding opportunities and applying for them is having a plan in place first. And that was really the basis for putting the plan together that we presented to you.
Yeah, I think Councilman, you were very much involved with the master plan. So you understand that even without the master plan, I mean, some of these grants wouldn't even be available because the first thing you look for is you have direction where you're going. At least that piece, which is flexible, but it's been instituted with this whole, actually it's instituted in everything concept that we're trying to move forward. We look at that as kind of like our sounding board.
The other thing I just wanted to comment, going back to the parking plan for the parking garages, I really strongly feel that the parking garages are really a major benefit to two entities, the county and the state. Some benefit to the city overall, but the majority of the benefit is going to be for parking for the employees of the state and the county. Strongly, they should either pay for it, or number two, they should definitely maintain it. As you know, the arterial work that's going to be done, a lot of the maintenance is going to be actually thrown back to the city. We have no choice on that.
If I can, Councilman, very good point, but I tried to express the fact that the reason why the county executive went to his own plan on B is because he would not pay for parking. That's clearly, he didn't want to go to a parking garage and share it with either ourselves or the state because he was not going to allow his people to pay. So that's when he decided, he presented them from the county legislators, that's where he's going with B, so he won't pay for it. And as far as A goes, to your point, if OGS comes back and it's something that we're not going to be able to afford, we won't. I won't. We'll look at C, or we'll stay with B. But to the point where the county, if the state needs to address their concerns, because the congestions that we have on these side streets are a lot of the state workers that are parking there and coming out every 90 minutes. They're not utilizing the parking that is available to them. It is right here. It's right here. I mean, there's ample parking, but they don't utilize it. And this will give them the opportunity, if there's a joint venture, to take them off the street.
Isn't that a paid parking lot?
Which one?
That one that they're supposed to use, that they should be using?
Yeah, Union parking lot. They won't use it because it's a paid parking lot.
So why would you spend
Nobody's
$1
gonna
million
use anything when you have to pay for parking.
Well, sometimes it's retraining, again, everybody. I mean, it's successful in other communities, and why is it not successful here? Because I don't think we've ever instituted a program and stuck to a program. I mean, just because it doesn't work doesn't mean it's not right. I mean,
Where do you get a job you can leave every 90 minutes and leave a car?
And get paid
not
for
City Hall.
You have to work for the government.
Well, I tell you what, I had this conversation with Tom Clark. He came, and he came to my office when he was sick, and we were talking about it. And I said, Tom, if it was, you watch, that's what he says. If it was mine, I said, how long? 90 minutes. He said, about 30 minutes, I'd bring them in, and they're fired. But that's not the issue here. The issue here was put a comprehensive plan together, put all the pieces together.
But again,
let's not point fingers.
You were comparing to other cities, and I've been to a number of other cities myself, and Albany, Syracuse, the county employees, the state employees, they pay for their parking. When I go to visit the DEC offices in Albany, they have paid parking right next to it. None of them get it for free. They were upset when they had to move downtown.
You're 110% right. And I go back to,
the county executive has to understand that.
Well, but at least if he addresses, Jim, the parking at this point, at least they'll be in another area, so it'll free up roughly 200 spaces you're looking for. But you're right, no matter where you go in New York State or anyplace else, you pay for the parking. I agree with you 100%. You're absolutely right.
I don't know whether to ask you, Mayor, or one of the other gentlemen, but it would be interesting to hear from our safety officials from both the fire department and the city police department, the number of the 9,000 vehicles that are safety vehicles and city vehicles that use Genesee Street daily. I come downtown for breakfast and lunch, sometimes 5 or 6 days a week, and I sit in the coffee shop window and I watch the emergency vehicles going by. 10 DPW trucks were headed south today on Genesee Street. And this is not after a heavy snowfall. They're out there heading, I presume they're cleaning up and getting ready to remove what's there.
Great job,
10
David.
city vehicles, and you know,
so
these guys, we have emergency vehicles, the fire trucks, the police cars, the city fire ambulances, Kunkel fire ambulances, and I don't think we've had that many accidents on Genesee Street with our safety vehicles proceeding through because of the width of our beautiful central street. But by the way, this morning I watched the sun come up over the Savings Bank in Utica, walking up to my car, parked in front of the ARC, and the sun shining on the facades of these buildings. You talk about it being dated and antiquated. We've got a beautiful downtown. If you want to do something, restore it to what it is and improve what you've got. But narrowing it to 2 lanes, we eliminate the ability to have parades like the St. Patrick's Day Parade, the Veterans Day Parades, or anyone else who wants to have
How do we
a parade.
eliminate them?
Because how are you going to fit them down a divided street with the bands, the size bands, and the size marching units that we have? But again, this public safety, the fire department is in front of the state office building at least 4 or 5 times a month doing emergency work with their fire engines out there and an ambulance.
Could we kind of maybe ask the professionals?
Should we ask them? I mean, what do they consider about narrowing the street to 2 lanes?
Absolutely. I mean, who wants to go first? Chief?
The only thing I'll say is this: this is proposal, we're not going to know until it actually goes in place. We put the vehicles through it. The only thing we have even to compare this by is what we currently have, that short stretch over by the roundabout, which was initially concerned. The initial concern there was that traffic was going to be backed up. As we saw, that's not happening.
People aren't coming downtown. I don't want to have.
But that being said, I don't see any public safety concerns. I had a very experienced captain that spent many years overseeing a traffic division that does a lot of traffic surveys. Had him look at the proposal. He doesn't seem to believe there's any concerns at this point regarding an emergency vehicle able to get through.
But we've had, to my knowledge, there's been no fire vehicles or police vehicles involved in accidents in the intersections between Oriskany Boulevard and I would say Oneida Square.
Let me explain exactly why. A couple of years ago, we applied for a grant, and it was a federal grant from it's called ICE-T. It's a federal grant for roads, and we acquired this Opticon system. And we have the ability to change lights as we go through intersections. And one of the things, this system, Opticon system, reduces response time by about 25%, but it completely eliminates accidents at intersections. With this system, you should never see an accident with a fire apparatus at an intersection. And Genesee Street was the first corridor that we did. And obviously, this system will still be in place when this project is done.
Will you have adequate space for your vehicles, reducing it in size?
I will say this, that just like with the roundabout, I provide the DOT with all the turning radiuses of our rigs, with the specs, with the width of our rigs. Actually, we just went over it today at a meeting. The mayor wanted to know what the width was when the stabilizers are down on the aerial to make sure that wasn't a problem. But having said that, I'm a fireman. You think I can look at a chart and measure and figure? No. I will go when they are doing this, and I told the mayor, block by block, I haven't identified a major issue or any issue. But as they do this block by block, I will go with fire apparatus. And I'll actually have to see how they maneuver. And we'll have to modify or accommodate whatever they're doing if there is a problem. But, you know, that's what my job is. You know, just like every fire chief in the country, they do fire chief's job isn't to get in there to doing a multi-million-dollar project. Well, can't do it, can't do that. I mean, I'll determine alternative routes. If there are better routes, I'll have test runs. You know, believe me, when this is done, I'll be 100% satisfied that, you know, we can provide service to everybody along Genesee Street.
Thank you, Jim.
If I have to stop the music, you know, the project, I don't have a problem doing stuff like that. See, Joe, we're always on the same side in these debates, you know? In Hibernians.
Oh, boy.
Irishman.
Yeah. got our other buddy behind you that, you know, nobody would be.
With that, if there's no other questions, I would invite you to come up and take a look at the layout of the median with the turning lane. And again, our office, whether it's Gordon's office or my office,
This is
available for questions, for comments.
Schenectady.
Could I have a comment. I've been waiting patiently for an appropriate moment. I'd like to address the big picture, and I have 3 or 4 points that I'd just like to bring forward. I've lived my whole life in the city of Utica. I was 20 years old in 1960 when this city was at its peak, and I'm 70, almost 74 now, so I've seen a half century of decline in this city. My aspiration is for Utica to thrive and prosper. Everything I think and everything I say is driven by that aspiration. I've heard reference tonight and on other occasions that, well, we need change. Well, what we need is improvement, not change. We need improvement. You can change things and have them turn out worse. We need to improve conditions downtown. We need to make it more convenient. We need to make it more welcoming to customers and people who engage in commerce. We need to make it more friendly. One of the things that will do that is more parking. More parking is better. I'm really happy to hear that we may end up with additional parking. But paid parking is worse. There are currently lots downtown, the lot on Union Street, the lot by the Stanley, between the Stanley and Firestone. They're half empty many days because people have to pay to use them. People don't want to use them. I won't use them. I was downtown today, stopped by to drop off some flyers about this meeting. I parked in front of the stand in front of Ancora around 3:30, 4 o'clock, no problem. Yesterday, I had business in the Bank of Utica. I stopped in to see Mr. Lasik. I dropped something off at Mr. Balzano's shop. I parked right in front of them, no problem. Parking is something people want convenient. If I've got to go to a pay station, if I've got to go and then I got to find change or fool around with a credit card or something and get a ticket and then go over to my car and put it on the dashboard and then I'm going to go and do my business and then I'm going to come back and leave, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go to Consumer Square, Sangertown, New Hartford Shopping Center, behind Cavallo's, they got all kinds of free parking. I can go to the shops there in New Hartford. I'm not going to come downtown. I'm not going to do that, period. And I'm talking about me. And I'm a loyal citizen of the city of Utica. I want to use downtown. I use it half as much today as I did a year ago because I won't go through that goofy thing at Oneida Square. And that's an absolute fact. I've started to migrate funds out of a downtown bank that I've done business with since 1970, and I don't want to do that. But I'm not going to put up with that nonsense. I'm moving funds out. I'm also thinking about moving my P.O. box out of the Butterfield Station up to by Price Chopper in South Utica. I haven't done it yet, but it's on my mind. So more parking is better, paid parking is worse. It puts downtown merchants at a commercial disadvantage compared to every other place. North Utica Shopping Center, Whitestown Shopping Center, Sangertown, I've named them all. None of them have paid parking. And people are going to go there. They're not going to come here and pay. Genesee Street, I understand putting on a road diet. We've got 205 miles of paved streets in this city, and we can't pave them. I understand it. Somehow we've got to end up with less paving. But Genesee Street is the signature street
of downtown. It's the signature street of this city. In many respects, it's the signature street of this entire region. I remember I was working in Canajoharie in Montgomery County when Ed Hanna put the lights in the trees on Genesee Street, and I said to myself, I said, why is he doing that? A month and a half later, people in Canajoharie, Fort Plain, Amsterdam, Johnstown were talking about how lovely Genesee Street is, all lit up, and they were driving up here to see it. So the point is that Genesee Street has implications for this entire region, not just the city of Utica. It should remain 4 lanes. It's a serious street. It's when people think of downtown Utica or even of Utica, they think of Genesee Street. And if you choke Genesee Street, you're going to choke Utica. You're going to choke it out of existence. There are things that I've heard tonight that I'm pleased about, the parking and so forth, but there are things in this proposal that will annihilate downtown Utica as a commercial destination. And we need to talk about this, build on the things that the merchants and the people who use, and their customers, the people who use this city want. And we need to drop by the wayside the things that they don't want. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir.
Brian, yeah, I keep the phrase road diet. And that's the way you're characterizing it. But a lot of people that I've spoken to are characterizing it as a road starvation diet. It's going to starve the downtown because if you go to 1 lane, how no one's talked about how the buses, when the bus stops to pick up people, or when UPS or when FedEx has to make deliveries. If you've choked this down to 1 lane, no one's addressed how the commerce is going to be dramatically affected by cutting off and only having 1 lane to deal with. When a bus stops to pick up passengers, when FedEx, when UPS, or when a tractor and trailer or a delivery truck stops at one of the places to deliver their goods, how come that hasn't been addressed? I'd like to see that addressed.
It actually has been addressed, Councilor. We've met with Ron Bucciero at Centro. He will be a part of the design moving forward as we move through detailed design. We've talked about identifying specific areas in each block where we'd have a designated bus stop location so that the buses can pull out of the traffic and they're not stopped right in the middle of traffic and impeding the flow of traffic. So we've already handled the bus issue. In terms of deliveries would be the same way. We would identify specific areas for delivery zones within each block, and those would be the areas where the deliveries would have to be made. Currently, a lot of deliveries, I agree, are being done illegally. They're double parking and in 1 lane of traffic. And that, again, going back to the mayor's comment, there's a mind change relative to parking, relative to traffic flow that has to come with this plan. And that is one mind change. The deliveries have to be made in the specific zones and not have the trucks parking illegally in the middle of traffic.
Can this plan be shown before we go much further? Where the buses are going to be?
That'll be a part of the detailed design.
And it's not ready yet?
Determined by the delivery trucks are not going, the reason why, if you see this plan, I have not put any delivery trucks because I'm not going to make that determination. It's going to be suggested by the businesses to me whether it would make more sense for them to have those delivery trucks.
But just think about this for a moment. This is another thing that's been brought up to me. 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a busy day or on a weekday, it starts to snow. You're going to have UPS or FedEx or a trucking company that comes in from wherever to make their deliveries. They're going to have to park 2 or 3 blocks away and then walk to those particular businesses or with their hand trucks on the sidewalk to make those deliveries.
No, each block they're going to have their own designated delivery drop-offs. No.
Every block, because I was told every 2 or 3 blocks. Now we're down to 1 block on every block.
We were said from the beginning that's going to be determined by the merchants and the people who run the businesses in Genesee Street. They're going.
Well, how can they make that determination if you're going to make like a bus stop, everyone knows where the bus stop is, at the end of every block. I think it's up to the city to make, if you're going to do one on every block, the city should say that where it's going to be. Utilize whatever vacant properties are there available to ask the businesses to make those decisions. There's no way they can do that.
We're asking for their input as part of the detailed design process.
Input, well, he said decision, okay, input's still a little different. I just have one thing to add. We've been talking about the businesses having input and whatnot. As this plan goes on, how are we going to be involved with the plan to voice our opinion? I mean, in other words, what I'm trying to say is, we were told at the last meeting that we would have an input. Specifically, Paul and I, we would have an input as far as the existing plan, the current plans and what we think. Well, how are we going to be notified? Because quite honestly, I wasn't even informed about this meeting. I didn't know about it, and Paul happened to hear it on WIBX, or I didn't know. My question is, we would love to be part of the future planning so we can voice our opinion, but how is this going to happen?
As a part of the RFP, when we go for engineering firm who is going to, that's going to be part of our proposal, saying it's going to be mandated that they have to have regular meetings with the businesses and certain dates, and we're going to determine that they have to notify you and saying this is where we stand with the design, this is the proposal, and give you.
So we will have definite input.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we might be able to change something that we don't feel is in the best interest to us. Do we have that possibility? I'm trying to just ask you, we do have a possibility?
Like, for example, the mayor's indicated that from the very beginning.
For example, sometimes it's easy to talk about handicap spots. Sometimes people, they want that, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the building itself is not handicap accessible. That can be, touchy for us. But some, said that's going to be determined, probably locations. We'd like to have it there, maybe it would be more accessible. We would be able to entertain that. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Really not.
If we're involved, that's
a lot. You will see when we send the request for proposal, that's going to be part of our proposal to the architects, engineers that they're going to have to.
But will you listen? That's the question.
Well, we'll get to that when we get.
We will absolutely listen.
Definitely. That's why we are here. That's why we made some.
Will it result in changing it the way you absolutely want it? Not necessarily, but we will listen to everyone. And that's really the meaning of these meetings that we're having.
Did you come up here to take a look at any of these?
Just to see how it looks. That's much.
We could talk at the same time as you're coming up there.
Yeah. Maybe
some of these food businesses, like the Triangle Coffee Shop, there is no entrance to the back of the building. The sandwich shop next door, many of these pizza places beyond coming this way, beyond the hotel. There's no access from the back. They have to unload the foodstuffs from the street, and it has to be done on a regular basis so that they have fresh food to serve on a daily basis. And I don't see where a truck is going to park halfway down the block and move their foodstuffs up on a daily or every other day basis into this food shop.
At this point, just so we understand, when they're getting a lot of their deliveries at this point, they're double parking at this point, aren't they?
Right, but it isn't impeding things.
It's illegal, isn't it?
It may be illegal, but it's not impeding things.
Let me ask you this. Is there a possibility that the Triangle's business could be enhanced while this project is going on? That all these construction workers and all these other people coming down there could be stopping in for a cup of coffee? Or don't know the business end of this, so I'm asking.
It is a possibility. Yes, I'll agree with you.
I mean, it seems to me it's but what do I know, I'm a fireman.
Right.
Well,
there has to be a combination.
We better get a roll of coming by sunglasses too.
There you go.
You must gotta know the time. Huh? You gotta know the time, right?
Question in the back?
Oh, yeah, I just want to make sure the letter's finished first. I just want to make sure I put in my comment about the situation with the decrease from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes. In communication school at SUNY Oswego and Herkimer County Community College. I know the one message that rang very strongly in any business class I went to was that customers, all of them, at all times, want convenience. And in construction jobs I worked on, one message that seems ringing very true, very strongly was everybody needs to be safe at all times. Now, cutting the lanes down from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, I can't see how you can do that without impeding traffic. Number one, that would be very seriously limiting to customer convenience. Cutting down on the number of customers per day any business can serve downtown. Number two, safety. For one thing, if there were ever a fire somewhere downtown that has to be accessed by some nearby street, near Genesee Street or Genesee Street, having Genesee Street as a 4-lane street would make that the easiest possibility. Having it as a 2-lane street would make it less likely that the fire department could arrive as promptly as they could now. I would say probably in most cases, because it's 4 lanes, allowing for more traffic flow, leaving more room for cars that are in the way to move aside. I guess that's probably all I should say about it. That's all I'm going to cover.
Thank you.
Would you like to step up and see
Brian, there seems to be, from what the businesses are saying, there's still a lack of communication. Maybe you've already started it with the sign-up sheet. Email is an easy way to communicate. If folks have email addresses, we could start getting the email addresses of all the businesses. So when there's meeting coming up, you want to share changes to the plan.